there just about a month and a half or 2 months. And I was looking all these places were no possible places. Again, a psychiatric residency because that's in the state hospital because that's where they were desperate for people, you know. But one that has a better, say, license situation than New York State. New York State, of course, was the destination of all the immigrants coming from Europe, you know, so it was loaded with new immigrants, and they were very difficult. It was very difficult to get really a license in New York, but I even didn't know exactly how difficult it was. And then I get a letter from the State Board of Medical Examiners when I was there about 2 months, or a little less, from New York, so I had to go into town and talk to the secretary of the State Board of Medical Examiners. This gentleman was sort of a tall guy, maybe about 6'3", 4", what, bald, slender, and nicely dressed, and his name was Stuart Easel. E-Z-E-L-L. And I have to tell you that in German, Esel is a jackass, donkey. So he, of course, in the United States, Esel is something else. And he had one sort of he was talking very nicely, had sort of the voice of a, I would say, of a minister, of a preacher, something like that. I was so very, so I, my antenna always go up when I deal with somebody that talks so very nicely. And he asked me, you know, this and that, and I tell him I graduated from the University of Louisville Medical. I had my neurosurgical training in Israel. I was chief of neurosurgery there in a big hospital for 4 years. And then he said, you know, you probably cannot get a license to practice medicine in the state of New York, because here in the state of New York, you have to go for 2 years to postgraduate medical school and 1 year internship, 1 year Israel residency. So 4 years, okay? And this is because I graduated from European Medical School after 1939, because I graduated in 47. And the state of New York, the legislation has all kind of, they approve medical school in France, in England, in Italy, and Italy had worse medical schools than my medical school was much better than Italian, but that doesn't matter. Lots of Italians in the state of New York. So. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I am faced with here forces. And I said, well, then I probably cannot stay there in the place where I am, the psychiatric hospital. And he said, no, you can stay. Don't hurry, because what you do now, you're going to answer in writing. We are going to ask you in writing. You'll get this letter eventually. Mm-hmm. Then you answer in writing, and we'll get it eventually. And by the time we look at it back and forth, a year is going to pass. You really don't have to move from there. Obviously, you know, they need slave workers for a little money, you know, so they bullshit you. Mm-hmm. But I thanked him, and then I really was seriously looking for positions, and I saw that in the state of Connecticut, there was an opening in one of the state hospitals in Norwich, Connecticut, and that they paid the same amount of money, and that in Connecticut you had to be a resident only in any hospital approved for residency training like that one was, only for 2 years, and then you can present yourself for the board of medical examiners and take your, I wasn't worried about passing any exam. It's just to be eligible for admission. So So I drive to Norwich, Connecticut, and go to the superintendent or the administrator of the hospital. You know, I even remember his name too. He was a nice guy. His name was Smaldon, D-O-N, small, so Don, small Don, Smaldon. He was a very nice man. And I present myself and I say I'm interested. He hired me on the spot, and the next day we moved to, yeah. And
So you didn't give any notice back in New York. You just packed it
well,
up.
I gave a little notice, but that administrator, you know, there is a difference between a physician and between an administrator at the board that looks at paper and legislation. And the administrator, I mean the physician in charge there, knew very well that I'm an immigrant and I'm a neurosurgeon. I had about 50 papers that I published. I was highly qualified, you know. And I have to be there a lowly resident just because I have to support my children, my wife. So he knew that I'm not going to be there. He just didn't know how long. And so when I found something, he let me go, you know, no problem. So I end up in Connecticut, and in Connecticut then that was another psychiatric hospital, just the same way as this one, except they had some American residents in training too, not only foreign physicians, you know. Yeah, apparently the hospital was just a step higher, you know, and had a better program for training psychiatrists. And two consultants, outside consultants, came to that hospital every month. One was the professor of neurology from the Yale University, and the other one was a professor of psychiatry from the Institute of Living in Hartford. The Institute of Living in Hartford is a famous psychiatric hospital, and the actress Jean Tierney was there, the patient also, they told me. She had a lobotomy there too. And these two, then I met them, and of course, actually it happened that all three of us were born in the same year. You know, very interesting. And we had lunch together, and after a few weeks, then the psychiatrist from Hartford says, you know, we have a department of research. We have a neurosurgeon there that does operations on monkeys. And we'd like to have you there. The neurologist said in his training program, he'd like to have his residents learn a few procedures that neurosurgeons do, like angiogram, injection of dye into the arteries, myogram, injection of dye in the spine to see if there are tumors there. And the neurosurgeons don't want to teach the neurology residents to do that because they don't want the neurologists in practice to compete with them doing some of these things that are somewhat better paid than a consultation, a neurological consultation. And so he said, you know, I could arrange a fellowship for you in neurology, and you could teach the residents to do all that, and then you are going to meet the chairman of the Department of Neurosurgery, and you can be our liaison person there, attend the meetings and all that. And and it also happened that while many neurosurgeons didn't have neurology training before they started neurosurgery, I did have, because in my last year and a half of medical school, in our system, actually, it was probably 2 years. In our medical school system in Cluj, as opposed in other places, after the first 2 years, you could be an extern, and in addition to attending classes, laboratories, and so forth, you could work in the hospital in a certain department, examine patients, draw blood for laboratory things, and do, this basic medical work. And then after 2 years of that, you can be an intern, and while you are still a student, and do the same thing, except for the fact that you get paid a little bit better. You have lodging in the hospital, the hospital campus, and you have food, and a salary too, a small salary, but you can live from that. So that's the reason. So the Romanian government, through the external internship things and previously scholarship, has paid for my education. And so in the last 2 years, however, I was an intern in psychiatry and neurology.
And how old were you?
Oh, I was, my last 2 years there, I was 25. Yeah. I graduated at 27 from medical school. And so I worked in neurology and psychiatry, so I had to examine patients, treat them, learn procedures like I did TAPS here, suboccipital and spinal TAPS. I did hundreds of them, got very good at that. And I had definitely a very good background in neurology and psychiatry. And so when I came to the psychiatric hospital, I knew very well what to do, So that's the reason they hired me so quickly too, But anyway, I accepted the offer of the physician of the chairman of the neurology department from Yale. We moved to Yale, and I was paid $7,200 a year. Now that is, how much is it a month? 600?
6 times, yeah.
Yeah,
That was a big raise.
yeah, it was
that's
more
right.
than 400.
That's good nowadays.
600 a month.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's minimum wage now.
yeah. Okay. So I was at Yale then.
You were
and,
rich.
Well, rich. And so we got at first an apartment in North Haven, and then after that,
North
moved
Haven or New Haven?
New Haven is where the hospital was, the university, Yale University. But the suburb of it was called
North
North Haven, a few miles north of it.
And we got an
And there is also
apartment.
West Haven, I
An
believe.
apartment. It belonged to an old couple, and they were sick and they couldn't take care of it. And I tell you, I was spider webs in the closet. It was in a terrible shape, and I scrubbed every single place that we got. I had to scrub it.
But then even after a while, I don't know what it was that they were selling the house or what, we had to move from there. And
Yeah.
we found it was basically a sort of a type of cabin on the Long Island Sound in Milford, Connecticut. That's in a different direction from New Haven, and I had to drive then on the freeway to the city every day. And so I had actually a very good time at Yale because, first of all, the medical standards are very high. They're very good physicians. I felt like among brothers there, And however, payment wasn't really enough. I needed another car. my car that previously wasn't any good for driving 60, 70 miles on the freeway with it, you know. And so I had to bought a Chevrolet with 6 cylinders for $1,500, huh? A new one, yeah,
Whoa.
a new one. But then I needed, so then I needed a second job. So I worked during the day there in the New Haven, the University Hospital, and in the evening I went to a private psychiatric hospital about 30 miles north of New Haven, and what was it?
But you were hardly home with knockdown.
How many hours
Yeah.
were you working a day?
Yeah, he last
How much sleep was he getting?
Came home late at night.
Well, who cares? When I was a resident in neurosurgery in training, I was at work day and night. I was
In his
up
helicopter,
almost
yeah.
every night, and I could fall asleep standing. I mean, I had that talent of falling asleep. In other words, the very moment I came home, I was able to sleep.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was always very busy seconds,
So,
minutes,
well-
asleep.
Well,
Yeah.
let's see, we still have a little time to talk about that. Well, when I went, somehow I heard that this hospital was looking for physicians. So I went there, and the head of that hospital, that little private hospital, interviewed me, and I was at Yale. Now Yale has such a prestige there that it's the stamp of class, you know. So being at Yale, already the door was open. And the fact that I knew psychiatry yet, not only from the time I was an intern, but also I did lobotomies in neurosurgery.
How many lobotomies did you do?
Oh, I had several hundred. And you know, you have to study those psychiatric patients to some extent before
They
you do
don't
that.
do lobotomies now very
No, they
often, do
don't.
they?
No.
Well, I hope not,
Why did they do that then?
because they didn't have medication. The medication they had just didn't do anything.
Right.
Then the lobotomies just dropped after 1952.
From people who were just
Yeah.
too crazy to
tell
survive
you.
without
Well,
it.
I
were
mean,
American, we
there
were
were
going to the
agitated
psychiatric institute.
departments in psychiatric.
You could see the
The whole
patients, you
night
know,
people were
some
crying, and
behind.
if somebody
and
went
some
there,
was
they
yelling
were
and all
grabbing
kinds of
you
terrible
and tearing your coat if they could. So, well, anyway, that's a
were
different story. Let me
rapists
just
there,
get
too.
on here with this
So
Yale
it didn't
story.
matter that you didn't get
What?
much sleep. You didn't care that you didn't get much sleep or anything because you were advancing your career. You did what you had to do.
It was even more than that. In addition to advancing my career, I had to support
Right.
2 children and a
Right.
wife. And I had to send $100 home to
your
my
parents.
parents because they didn't have
Anything.
there in Israel.
Right.
And then Magda's mother too.
She
No, actually,
had the
not
husband
married.
yet.
She had
Oh,
her
she
husband.
did, right.
So
And
when
she got
did,
a
when
pension
did,
after
how many
she
years
died.
did it take for your parents to come over then?
My parents came home in 1961.
So how many years had you been in the States?
They,
Wow.
57. For-
well, I was in the States, you know, at the end of 57, so I was
2 years.
58, 59, 60, 61. And Yale definitely was helpful, the more so as the chairman of neurology
Oh, sorry.
broke a leg just about a month after I came. And he asked me to be the consultant at the other hospitals there in New Haven, where he had to go to the private hospital. There was New Haven Hospital there, and the Veterans Administration. He had to go there all the time, and the rehabilitation place, hospital. He had to go there all the time to see patients, and was paid $25 for a consultation. And he asked me that I should do all that, and he got the $25.
And you got nothing?
No, I had his goodwill that he took me there, and it was a springboard for the future.
Yeah.
That was the great thing what he did for me, you know. But he needed money himself, you know. The salaries at Vail aren't really at Yale aren't that great, and he had 2 children, a wife to support too. Yeah. So I did that, and I actually even had to go to Bridgeport, Connecticut, to one of their staff meetings to see a number of patients. So it was, I would say, a very nice glory time, you know, because you get lots of respect. I spent as much time in neurosurgery as I could. The head of neurosurgery, the chairman of neurosurgery, was a true gentleman, but very nice to me, and Magda, of course, was home alone, and 8 o'clock in the evening, the children went to bed. Magda looked at that ancient little
Dracula.
television that with the Dracula, and she learned English that way. And I came
I
home
never had an
at
instructor.
11 o'clock.
I know it on
Okay.
my own.
But speaking about the contacts I've made, the chairman of neurosurgery knew that I want to get into neurosurgery from neurology there, and that I want to be, I want to have all the rights of a neurosurgical specialist in the United States, just like anybody else who trains in the United States. See, before I came to the United States, I wrote to the secretary of the board of neurological surgery, you know, the ones that examine neurosurgeons and give them the qualification of specialist. You are board specialized, board certified. I wrote him a letter that I'm chief of neurosurgeon, Israel, this and that, had all those papers and qualifications, and that I wanted to come to the United States somewhere. And he said, yeah, fine, you can come to the United States, but you will never, he said, never be admitted to take your board of neurosurgery to be certified. And see, he made the mistake of never there, okay? When I saw never, then I said that thing like that does not exist. And I came to the United States anyway. And the chairman of the Department of Neurosurgery at Yale, you know, he was the one in charge of conducting the board examinations of neurosurgeons that want to be certified. That was in May of 1958. And the secretary of the board, the very same one that wrote me the letter, was there too, you know. And the chairman invited me to meet him, and they were both sitting there and me. And I had my book of operations that I did, you know, in Israel the last 4 years when I was at the Tel Meir Hospital. And every brain operation or spinal cord operation and so on, and a bigger operation, when I registered the patient and the problem and what I did, I also made a drawing with the brain tumor or spinal cord tumor, whatever it was. And so I presented them my book of operations, and they had many of operations in just 2 years. And so they looked at it and they said, oh, just like Dr. Cushing, he made the drawings too. And I even didn't know Dr. Cushing. See, Dr. Cushing, the father of modern neurosurgery in the United States. Dr. Cushing, Dr. Dandy were the ones that created neurosurgery in the United
And
States.
she into
So Dr. Cushing also,
anatomical drawings.
well, so Dr. Cushing apparently made his drawing. I didn't know that. My chief used to do that, and I did the same thing because it was practical and you remember exactly what you did. And so they were impressed with that, and that's fine. And then that gentleman that wrote me about Never, he said, well, you know, it's true that you have to be trained in one of the approved training centers in the United States at Canada, but we have also a provision that if you practice neurosurgery in the United States for 5 years and your training is approved by the board, no, your practice is approved. In other words, they check your patient, the outcome there. And if they think that it's okay, then you are admitted to take the exam, to be board certified, you know. Of course, I need only to be admitted to the exam because I knew I can take it any time, you know. And so I find out that this Never really doesn't exist, you know.
Well, luckily he didn't stay true to his word. Luckily he didn't stay treat you that way.
Gene was
In the
working
end.
No,
so hard at
he
the same
wanted to
time.
discourage me from coming. They didn't want more neurosurgeons than that. That was all, you know. And he made that mistake that he was not totally truthful, you know. And he had to eat his hat, you know,
Yeah, luckily
telling
he
me
did
all
that,
that.
yeah.
And that professor of neurosurgery, the chairman, was next to him. So then I found out that I really can take that specialty exam. Now, in the United States, you need only a license to practice medicine in a state, and you can do also neurosurgery without being a board certified specialist. But for me, it wasn't enough. I wanted to be just as far as everyone that was, you know, trained in the United States, you know. And to the top of the line. In specialty, this is the top of the line, you know, a board certified specialist. Otherwise, you can be a professor somewhere if you want to. But professors are not necessarily even esteemed as much as people in private practice. So that was good. So then I was there, and then we get a resident there in pathology, a neuropathology. Actually, the professor of neuropathology was a Greek, also an immigrant, and he passed his exams, whatever. He was actually a very good professor of neuropathology, that means the pathology